Welcome to the Menstruality podcast, where we share inspiring conversations about the power of menstrual cycle awareness and conscious menopause. This podcast is brought to you by Red School, where we're training the menstruality leaders of the future. I'm your host, Sophie Jane Hardy, and I'll be joined often by Red School's founders, Alexandra and Shani, as well as an inspiring group of pioneers, activists, changemakers, and creatives to explore how you can unashamedly claim the power of the menstrual cycle to activate your unique form of leadership for yourself, your community, and the world. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you're doing well. I'm curious, have you ever noticed that your intuitive sense of knowing is heightened when you're premenstrual? Today, we're exploring the radical honesty that can be invoked in inner autumn and asking the provocative question, what if our unadulterated, fierce, premenstrual truth speaking is actually exactly the medicine our world needs at this time? My guest and conversation partner is Maya Luna, who describes herself as an artist, a channel, an oracle, and the creator of the Venus Path, a modern adaptation of ancient Fertility Goddess Spiritual Path that works with sensuality, the body, the deep heart, passionate energy, and the incarnate human experience. She's very well known for her work around sacred rage, and one of my favorite quotes of hers is, "Feminine rage will save this world, and we will snarl, bite, hiss, and roar for what is good and true, for the protection of innocence, for the sovereignty of our bodies, for love." Today, Maya shares how she navigates what she calls the dark goddess truth serum that pulses through her in her premenstrual phase, and how she's learning to skillfully and artfully share it in the world. And unsurprisingly, given the topic, we drop quite a lot of F-bombs in this conversation, so please wear headphones if you're around little people. And make sure you stay listening until at least halfway through, where Maya almost has to call me out on my own bullshit. So let's get started with the power of premenstrual truth-telling with Maya Luna.
Well, interestingly, I was feeling into this talk and, my work doesn't really get into menstruation stuff, but I have been having such a profound experience the last few months of my cycle of this really deep, dark goddess truth serum that comes online before I bleed. It's very powerful. It feels like I just have owl vision and I can just see bullshit and I'm just like, and I was speaking to another friend who reached out to me for support because whenever she's about to bleed, she gets really like she falls out of love with her partner. And so I've just been thinking a lot lately about this kind of psychedelic journey of how we kind of we really go into the underworld where things get turned inside out and we sort of see the other side of things. The dark side reveals itself, you know?
Yes, I know. I'm in it right now.
Yeah, I know you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really up for me right now. Like, I don't usually get cranky when I'm, premenstrual, but the last couple of months I've just been like, just like, and I have to be really careful because it's just like that's the energy is I'm just like, truth or get the fuck out.
Maya has like a sword in her hand that she is striking through the air, like cutting through the bullshit.
Yeah, it's like how to wield that, and all the ways that our society shames that, calls it like a syndrome, right? And just like what happens when we recontextualize it out of the pathologizing,
Yes.
potentially misogynistic kind of paradigms of PMS.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's go into it because you and I are both in that place in the cycle. I'm on day 24, but I'm going to have a really short cycle because I ovulated early. So it's kind of day 27, how day 27 would normally feel. So I've
Yeah.
been taken on that ride over the last 5 days. And this podcast might come out a little bit later, but what's just happened in the world is Kamala Harris might be up as the Democratic nominee. And that's been a big part of my premenstrual journey this month. I've been learning a lot from Black women around what this might mean for Black women over the next 100 days in the US. And it's been one of those moments of premenstrual wake up and
Mm.
premenstrual truth seeing, and but also just feeling the mess and the pain of the world. So that's what I've been with in the over the past few days, and I'm just looking forward to being able to drop out of the world for a couple of days when I bleed and then come back ready for action. And it sounds like you're in a similar place. You said you're on day 30.
I'm very, very, very late.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very late. Very unusual for me to be late. I'm like 35.
And how has it been over the past few days? Tell us more about the truth telling serum.
Well, this has been happening the last couple of months for me. I'm someone who historically, before I bleed, I tend to get more kind of weepy. Like I'll usually have a really big cry within the 24 hours before I bleed. And the last couple of months, it's been a very, very, very different energy that comes online. The last 3 months. And it's very strong. And it just feels like I have no tolerance for people lying to themselves or lying to me. And where I would normally be able to see with a more kind of gentle, oh yeah, they're hiding from themselves, or they're not being totally honest about this, they're delusional about that, all these little things that we kind of notice in people. And you just kind of go, huh. It's like my whole system feels, first of all, like I have X-ray owl vision. I can see through everyone's bullshit. I can see where they're being dishonest with themselves. I can see where they're delusional. I can see where they're lying to themselves. And I have no tolerance for it. It's like my whole system is just an absolute no. And it's very confronting because it really, it obviously challenges, where I tend to lead in my personality, which is being kind and, like accepting people as they are, right? It's just like, you know, and it's so intense though. It's like and it really feels physical in my body. It's an absolute revulsion to anything that feels dissonant in people. And and there's a really strong impulse to name it, you know, not in a cruel or shaming way, but just to name it. I see you, right? And then that's also confronting because should I name it? Should, like, is that even appropriate or responsible? Um, and and then it's interesting because often I'll find myself, going, but don't name that, don't say that, that's not a, keep that to yourself. But it just like, oh, it just, woo, it's like, it's just, I can barely stand the elephant in the room. And it's like that owl vision, this like dark god. Oh, I can just see through like X-ray vision, right? And so it's really interesting because I think, culturally, we don't have a space for the dark goddess and the dark goddess truth serum. We don't know how to hold it in ourselves. We don't know how to hold it in community. We don't know how to hold it with other people. We, the blood right mysteries, the crone, the hag, all these different kinds of what I would say actually is it is an expression of love. It's a very particular radical form of feminine love, but we don't have context for it, right?
Yes.
And so what it can seem like from the dominant paradigm and thankfully I've liberated myself from those paradigms enough that I don't really get hooked, but I do notice them because it's just kind of like, wow, this is like bitchy
Yeah.
energy, right? And it's easy to kind of, I don't really get hooked by it, but I can definitely sense it, like, that there's something taboo about this state as
Yes.
a woman, right? There's something taboo about it. And I had to really sit with it because it's been so strong. I mean, so unbelievably strong. And I actually have a medicine story about one of the things that unfolded in it that taught me a lot. Um, I'll tell that story actually. That's probably a really good place to go.
That would be great.
Yeah, so I was just kind of noticing my own relationship to it and like how willing am I to step into it and how obviously questions of ethics and integrity come up. But interestingly, what I started finding was anytime I would silence it, it actually fell out of integrity.
Yes. How could you tell it fell out of integrity?
Well, interestingly, it was like the dissonance I'm seeing in the other person. Now I'm feeling the dissonance in me.
So there's like a new kind of permeability. Mm,
Just a sense of dissonance,
mm,
like I've abandoned something very sacred,
mm,
which is this deep truth that I can smell. My
mm.
my sniffer, my sniffer is so highly tuned in.
Mm, mm,
So the story I have to tell is, like I said, this has been happening the last 3 months, and it's new for me. It's not usually what happens in my premenstrual phase. And I was having it so strongly come up with a friend of mine, a man who's a really, really close friend of mine. He's like one of my closest friends. And I just, it was so intense and and it would start manifesting as irritation when I wouldn't say anything. It was just like, oh, okay, like. And by the way, this has nothing to do with our personal relationship. This is just witnessing him talk about himself and his life. And I can just see that's bullshit. Like that is bullshit, what you're saying. It's not. And I can see exactly what's going on for you. And I know, and I see what's going on, right?
mm, mm,
And I'm
mm.
just like, oh, okay. Like, and, like I said, I'm in this process of is it ethical to say, is it not? Where are those boundaries, right? And then it feels off to not say. And so finally one day I said something. And in my felt experience, if the energy of the truth of what I was sensing and the power of the energy of what I was sensing was like this big, I gave him that much. I gave him a microdose.
So for our listeners, Maya's arms were spread right out at the beginning and then they came into a tiny little droplet. So this is a
Oh,
droplet of
yes.
the truth serum.
Right, right, right. So huge. And then I went, whoop, here's a little tiny microdose sacrament of truth.
Mhm,
I'm just going to place it on your tongue and just
mhm.
see. That was my experience.
Yeah.
His experience was so intense receiving that.
Mm,
It like blew him out of the water.
mhm.
It was intensely confronting.
Yes.
He was a little bit defensive. He just basically went into a very intense psychological emotional process reacting to what I had said and chewing on it. But it just, the impact was so big. So there was defensiveness, but there was also seeing it and also being like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't see that. And he just had a massive experience, right? And I was like, whoa, okay. And
Mm,
that showed me, you know, this is stronger than I thought. Because again, in my experience, it was so gentle and so small what I offered. And it just blasted him like a rocket, right? Okay,
mm,
so here's where things got interesting. I wouldn't say he was totally defensive, but there was a little sense of bitterness in the space when we got off the phone. Like there was a little bit of a sense of like, kind of where he was just kind of like, I'm not okay right now, you know? as a result of what I had brought. And so then what does that bring up for me? We get off the phone and he texts me the next day and he's basically like unraveling.
Mm.
He's like, I'm not okay right now. What does that bring up for me? Guilt, of course, right? I'm like, oh, fuck, shit, right? And then there's all the cultural programming again. Oh, is that just my bitchy PMS thing, right? Like, I'm not being a nice woman, right? I did something wrong, maybe. He wasn't blaming me or anything. He just was like, I'm falling apart right now. And but what is so interesting, because again, he's a really good friend of mine, so we speak probably almost every day.
Mm.
What's so interesting is that kind of unraveling that was the result of the microdose of truth, dark goddess truth serum I gave him. You know, he was kind of spiraling and unraveling and like, having this really big experience for about 2 to 3 days. Then we didn't talk for a couple days. We kind of took some space. And since that time, he basically emerged out of that and made the decision that he was essentially recognizing that he had been striving to live inside of an idealized false construct.
Mm.
There were all these things he was doing in his life that were this kind of way that he was trying to make himself important,
Mm.
right? Through different career things and like trying to become significant.
Yeah.
And that it was actually abandoning his essence.
Mm.
This was exactly the thing that I had been seeing the whole time, that I was just like, oh, like I can't, and but like he got it.
Mm.
And since then, I have watched him in like the most beautiful journey of self-reclamation and like really coming back to his just humble human essence, beautiful self that he had kind of abandoned in
Mm.
this attempt, as many of us do. It's a very common thing. We kind of try to create these special, I'm important, and we abandon ourselves in the process. So, and then that was really interesting because I was like, okay, right? Actually, something profoundly beautiful and healing and redemptive and life-giving came out of this.
Yeah.
But the initial period was like, ah, and like, ow, like, wow, why are you doing,
Yes, 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 yes.
So that taught me a lot about this particular phenomena, which
Mm.
I guess I would say is the um, the crone, hag, sorceress, dark goddess, truth serum that can become available
Yeah.
in the premenstrual zone.
Yes. I think our listeners will be nodding and roaring and like with you. I
Yeah.
resonate with that feeling of I can see the bullshit out here and it wants to
Yes.
pour out of my body and end the bullshit. And that
Yeah.
the energy it takes to hold Alexandra and Shani, who created Red School, they talk about holding the tension. This charge that's surging through us, learning how to grow the muscles of holding the tension there so that you masterfully, like you did, we can take the one drop and
Yes.
land it rather than just burning the whole thing down.
Right. There's an artfulness to it for sure. There's a skillfulness. I would say skillfulness is probably the word. And I think I'm still learning that skillfulness, you
Yeah.
know.
I'm curious how you feel about this context that Alexandra and Shani lay down. It's in their book Wise Power, which is actually about menopause. But they speak about how the 40s, I'm not sure how old you are.
39.
Okay, so maybe this is the portal. I'm in 42. But they speak about like the 20s as the spring of our menstruating years, the 30s as the summer of the menstruating years, and the 40s as the autumn, the fall of the menstruating years. And how the 40s then can become kind of a macrocosm of the microcosm of the premenstruum. So the powers of the premenstruum can come online much more,
Oh, wow. That makes so much sense.
doesn't it? And we see women in their 40s and then particularly it amping up as they get into their 50s and towards menopause.
Hmm.
That they get called, like you said, hags and crones and witches and bitches and for
Hmm.
simply saying this is not okay, this must change.
Hmm.
And I just wonder if like I'd love to hear how that lands for you.
Well, I mean, gosh, I love this conversation so much. And I just, the first thing that comes to me is just in a world where, we have basically patriarchal femininity conditioning, which is, to be nice and be sweet and be kind and be loving and be gentle and, which is what I had to face when my friend had that reaction, right? It was like, oh, I was like not being a nice lady, right? I was being a bitch. It's like it's very interesting to turn it on its head and explore, how are we as women when we hold this power back of our sacred truth and this dark goddess truth serum, how are we enabling the destruction on our planet? How are we enabling
Holy yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
systems of harm, all the fucking bullshit that's happening in the world? How are we actually enabling it by trying to play nice?
And how much is the premenstruum calling us? Like you said, the dark goddess, and I really want to hear you speak more about that term, but it's like she's calling to us from the premenstruum. Come on, you're
Yeah.
needed. The world needs you. The world needs this fierceness.
Yeah, the fierceness, and also it's interesting because it doesn't the way it manifests for me doesn't feel like anger or cruelty. It feels like, and this is really what I feel the dark goddess is. It's what's underneath, It's underneath all the layers. This is what happens when Inanna descends into the underworld to meet Ereshkigal, the dark goddess. It's the stripping, right, of all the layers, all her accoutrements of power, all her, right? So all of the external layers, the dark goddess medicine is like what's underneath, right? You can see the core, you can see the essence. And that's that owl vision I was talking about. Like suddenly I'm just so, I can see so deeply into people and situations. And that's another interesting thing because I think that when women are not trusting of their own perception, they can often gaslight themselves and feel like they are crazy or something's wrong with them. Something must be wrong with me.
Yeah. Because like with a friend, you could have said, "Oh, I'm out of alignment here."
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. You could have gone all the way into that.
Okay, so that's such a good point because that's another thing that mostly spiritual women and women that are into personal development will do. They'll go, "Oh, I'm triggered. So something's going, something's being touched in me here, and what is this about me?" And then we just miss the whole thing. But I think there's this other piece, which is just, when you sense when you have this kind of sensitivity and you basically sense dissonance in the world or other people, you sense where there isn't truth happening, where there's distortion. I think often if a woman isn't really trusting herself and trusting what she knows, she'll think that she's mistaken. She'll think she must not be seeing clearly.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, second guessing, doubting, imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud.
Yes, exactly. And this is something that, like, before this really deep dark goddess truth serum thing started to come online a few months ago, it's so interesting what you said about the 40s, because maybe that's what it is. Because it's new for me, actually. It's not how I'm used to experiencing my premenstruation time.
How was it before?
Well, like I said, I would get very weepy. Like I would
Uh-huh.
definitely feel just very like tender and sensitive. I'd usually cry right
Yeah, got it.
before.
Yeah.
And then, but one of the other things that would happen that does feel kind of related to this, and I think is common for a lot of women, is it becomes like a psychedelic journey where it's like all of a sudden you just see everything that is not working in your life. Like, that's not working, that's not working. I don't like that. I don't like that. Like it becomes very negative, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's and I would just always hold it as like a psychedelic journey. I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to make any major life decisions right now. I'm going to wait until I bleed, but I'm going to take the information that I got during that like deep time of negativity and apply it to the holistic vision of my life,
Yeah.
See the dark side, basically.
Yeah, which needs to be seen. It's a part of life, but as you said before, it's not a part of life that we embrace collectively as a
Yeah,
culture. So it can feel terrifying. It can feel like everything is wrong. Catastrophizing can happen really quickly. I
that's
mean, I've
right.
been with my guy for 8 years now, and it's taken me a freaking long time, but I feel like I'm finally in a place now where I can hear the barrage of insults at him that is coming through me, like all of the
Uh-huh.
things that's wrong with him, and I can hold that,
Uh-huh.
and part of me can go, uh-huh, I hear you. I can
Mm-hmm.
track that a lot of it's coming from my trauma with men.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So a protective part of me that wants to protect me and keep me safe away from man, so I can track that. And then, like you said, I can take it into the bleed and I can hear what, I mean, this is a perfect situation. It often doesn't look like this. It often looks much messier. But when I'm going well, I can go through the bleed and then hear what the course correction is. Like, hey, this is off a little in our relationship. Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest, it doesn't often play out like that. This is my practice. I need to
And
I
respect
need
your
to hold.
honesty.
Yeah, see, were you about to call bullshit out with your sword? You're like,
You're like, I better not.
oh no.
I have to be really clear here.
Usually it's coming out with some fire on like day 26. But when I can hold it and be with well, usually then I touch some pain. I get to feel the pain underneath the rage, and then I can find the course correction
Yes.
rather than raising the whole thing down with the fire.
Yeah.
Which makes me think of what you were saying about the dark goddess. It's like being with the descent, the underworld descent enough, not trying to run away, not trying to escape, not trying to numb out, but being with that enough so that I can feel the medicine.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and that there's that skillfulness again. Like it really is like a psychedelic journey. It's like taking a sacrament, and there's a skillfulness in taking a medicine journey. There
Mm.
are tools that you use. You don't just want to like freak out. You want to really use the medicine well. And
Mm.
maybe that's part of what happens in the 40s too, is kind of like, whereas maybe in the 20s, our hormonal cycles are just like, oh my God, it's like so intense. You like don't even know how to handle it. And by the time you're 40, you're kind of like, okay, like you're starting to get more skillful with how to work with all these different, yeah,
Yes.
phases of the cycle.
And it's different for everybody, but I think estrogen starts to fluctuate more. And estrogen is like the people pleasing
Uh-huh.
hormone. So like
Yeah.
over these 3 months, I'd be curious to hear. Maybe there's just a little bit less estrogen in the system.
Hmm. Hmm. There's something too that I've always felt so fascinated with, particularly because, like I said, my experience of the premenstrual phase has always been just really tender and kind of weepy and like just so sensitive. And just, I feel like oftentimes when we are bleeding, especially that first day, or right before the bleed, what's happening is that as women, we are touching the pink, tender core that is inside of all human beings, men and women, underneath all the defense mechanisms, underneath all the coping strategies. We are just these tender, pink, vulnerable, sensitive feeling beings. And that's often what happens too, is like you just can't, you just literally don't have access to the defense mechanisms that you normally do in other parts of your cycle.
Mhm.
And that has always fascinated me, how that state gets really pathologized, as like something's wrong, when actually it feels to me like it's a very, very pure, like touching the core of the human experience, underneath all the armor,
Mm.
underneath all the coping strategies, underneath all the defense mechanisms, and just landing at that just raw, sensitive, tender, pink, fleshy feeling being that we all are underneath,
Mm.
And there's something about that that I see how sacred that is. And obviously the legacy of the rejection of menstruation and the hiding of menstruation and the hatred of menstruation that has been going on for so long on this planet is a reflection of, yeah, our hatred of the dark goddess, our hatred of, seeing the real, true, seeing the dark side, and that pink, vulnerable, tender, fleshy feeling core that we all are underneath.
I'm going to pause this conversation just for a moment. We have an invitation for you. If you'd love to step into the premenstrual power that I'm exploring with Maya Luna today, please consider joining our new self-paced cycle power course. For the whole of August, you can receive 33% off using the code SUMMER. And I wanted to share a few of the things that people have been sharing about the course so far. One woman said, "It's richer than any other work or spiritual practice I've encountered." Another said, "A total game changer." Another said, "I feel I've cracked some new coding and I love it." And there's a beautiful story from one woman who says, "For the first time in my entire life, age 45, I get the magic of the bleed." So this course is for you wherever you're at in your cycle awareness journey, whether you're month 1 or month 100. The course will help you find your way to live, love, and lead from your cyclical intelligence. You can take your seat on the course at redschool.net/cycle power. And remember to use the code SUMMER to get 33% off for the few remaining days in August. I'm curious, I'm thinking of the word oracle because I feel like it comes up quite a lot in your work, and how the relationship plays out for you between both the truth seeing serum, but also that tender, vulnerable, defenseless,
Hmm.
and your work in the world as an oracle, or your way of being as an oracle,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how that plays out cyclically.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like the most true thing I can say right now is just that as I've been getting initiated into this premenstrual dark goddess truth serum, what I keep noticing is I have this deep hunger to be in the presence of someone who's like hungry for it, who's just like, give it to me. I want it. Strip me down, show me.
Mm.
Which is basically the oracle, template. They would travel to the oracle temple and have to go through a whole process, the Oracle of Delphi, the Pythia. I have a Pythia quote on the back of my neck that I got when I was 23.
Wow.
and they would come with one question, and she would basically go into a liminal state of channeling. She would actually be huffing these like hallucinogenic psychedelic gases coming up from cracks in the earth. And then she would give an answer, and the answer was often in this kind of poetic riddle form.
Mhm.
But I can really feel that, and I can feel, I think it's just because in the course of my initiation, it's only been like 3 months, so it still feels very kind of new for me, navigating all the ways that I see that this energy in me is not welcome and is seen as a failure on my part or a bad thing. And just how profound it's been for me to journey through the little places where I had to kind of check those stories and be like, is that? And then just like, no, this is so beautiful and sacred and pure.
Mm.
And it's love, actually. It's a very fierce kind of love, but it's love to see through bullshit. It's love to see through distortion. It's love to see the core.
It's transformative.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, look what happened to my friend. He's having such a beautiful return to what he's calling his human self.
And we've all had those truth-telling moments where a good friend or
Hmm.
someone in our lives has named something that was so painful.
Hmm.
Like back to my relationship, one of my mentors said, look, you just need to choose, you need to choose. Are you going to lean into aid how he is, or are you going to just keep trying to fix him for the rest of your life and change him into who you want to be?
Oh,
And
yeah.
people had said it before, but there was something about the energetic that was coming through. And she's a postmenopausal woman. She has been practicing with wielding this truth for like a decade, and it hit me, and it changed me,
Wow.
and it's changed the way I've been for the last year.
That's it. Sometimes the truth hurts, and sometimes that hurts so good. And it's what we need, but like it does have a little ouch inside of it. But that's the whole thing, is that it's so contrary to in my Sacred Rage body of work, which was the first kind of thing that you reached out to me. I have a whole kind of I mean, maybe other people talk about this. I don't know. I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, but I call it like, we talk about toxic masculinity,
Mhm.
which unfortunately a lot of people seem to be, I don't know, confused or defensive, like thinking that that's like anti-masculine or something like that. What I see it as is it's a it's a form of conditioning that happens to men through culture around what being a real man is and what masculinity is. And it's a set of rules, and those rules are toxic to men themselves and the people around them, but also to themselves, right? It's don't cry, suck it up, don't be a pussy, be a real man, be dominant, be on top, be in control, right? That's toxic masculinity. It's a set of cultural conditioning that tells men what they're allowed to be and what they're not allowed to be as men, as masculine beings. So, toxic femininity then is the way that women are conditioned culturally of how they're supposed to be as women and what being a feminine being is, which is smile. Why don't you smile more? Be pretty, be beautiful, focus on your appearance, be nice to other people, be accommodating, don't have too many boundaries, don't say no, right? So, just like toxic masculinity, those cultural constructs are toxic to women themselves. But here's the other piece, and people around them.
Yes.
That's the piece we were talking about with the enabling.
Yeah.
Like how we actually are inadvertently contributing to the systems of distortion or harm because we're playing nice.
Yes.
Because with toxic masculinity, it's very easy to see how that causes harm to other people. A lot of people are, I think, don't pay much attention to how it harms men themselves, which it absolutely does, right? Because both toxic masculinity and toxic femininity are basically dehumanizing because, right, they don't allow for a person to be a whole human being, a full spectrum human being. It's just saying you're allowed to be this, but not that, right?
And there's the uprooting from the authentic self that we were talking about earlier. You can't
Yes.
be your authentic self when you're trying to play by all of these rules that,
Exactly. And so with toxic femininity, I think it's easy to see how those constructs are harmful for women, fawning and people pleasing and not advocating for yourself and being a doormat and not speaking up and letting people use and abuse you. Um, but I don't think we see how it can actually be toxic for the people and the world
mm,
around us.
mm. So back to the premenstrual power or the power of the 40s, because those qualities that you were describing are very much kind of maiden era qualities with a bit of
Yeah.
mother in there as well, like which are really the only like two acceptable ways to be a woman in our culture is like be like 20 years old and running around in a white dress through a meadow, or be a mother, like nourishing everybody and sacrificing everything for other people. In comes boom, boom,
Yeah.
40s, premenstruum. It's like, no, I want pleasure for myself because I deserve it, because I'm a being that exists on this earth. Or no, I see truth, I see bullshit there, and I'm going to call it. The premenstruum is calling us to just cut through the toxic femininity. Yeah.
Totally. 100%. 100%. And the estrogen thing that you were talking about too, right?
Yeah.
Supports that, the shift in estrogen. Yeah, I totally see that. And I think there's actually a similar thing for men actually, which is I think as testosterone shifts later in age, men oftentimes like start entering their heart more and they're kind of become softer and more sensitive and so it's interesting. Yeah, it feels like midlife and later in life really supports us in stepping outside of the toxic
Mm,
masculinity, femininity paradigms. Yeah, I'm
mm,
really excited for my 40s. I'm like,
mm,
I'm into it. And you know what else is really interesting? I feel like this is just connected to the whole thing, right? Because from within those maiden fetish ideas of femininity and womanhood, right? Ovulation, right, is obviously, I don't, have you, you know what? You've probably seen this, but if you haven't, you should.
hmm
And everyone here should. Maybe it can go like in the show notes. There's some kind of art project where someone, they did this with multiple women, but they took a picture of their face every day of their cycle.
mm.
And then you can watch it in fast time motion, right, as they're changing. And literally, what you see is like during ovulation, like the face comes out. It's like the flower blooming, the cheeks get pink, the color of the eyes gets bright.
Wow.
And then during premenstrual, everything kind of, it's like, right? So amazing. I mean, like so
Mm.
amazing. Like if you want to just like worship like what woman and the goddess and the cycles of creation is, like look this up and find it. It's unbelievable to
I will
watch,
find it and I'll put it in the show notes.
right? So what I wanted to speak to was just like, being 39 and entering my 40s, right? It's like this journey of watching the maiden beauty fade, and like really starting to see that happen in bigger and bigger ways now. Like my the particular beauty that I had as a maiden, which is the more culturally kind of sanctioned idea of what beauty
Yes.
is fading.
Yeah.
It's dying. I'm watching it die
Mm,
slowly,
mm,
right? And I know every year it's just going to fade more and more.
mm.
And I'm connecting that because, right, there's that whole part of rejecting the premenstrual and the menstrual because it's just, that's kind of it's the ugly quote unquote time of our cycle, right? We're bloated,
Crazy.
Yeah, and you have pimples and you're like, and then ovulation is like, ah. So that's really interesting to me too. And I feel like it's connected, right? I mean, I guess, yeah, because it has to do with menopause and everything, but it's just because I'm watching myself be like, should I get Botox? Like all these things that I never thought I would think. Like it's just
Mm.
like coming in, like, should I? And I'm just like, I don't think so. But like,
Yeah.
wow, it's a real, I guess I just feel very inspired, like as I step into my 40s. I've always loved crones. One of the first viral pieces I wrote on the internet was about the crone. I'm very excited to be a crone. I feel like I've always had crone energy, even when I was really young. Like I think crones are the coolest.
Hmm.
But still, watching my maiden beauty fade is showing me my own, you know, hooks into patriarchal beauty standards.
Yeah.
And, it just seems like it's so, even the most radical feminist, like badass women, it's just really, really common for us to cling, right? Cling. Oh, no, 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 don't go, don't go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's something that I'm just really turned on by is like, I just want to create spaces, I think, in the future for women to intentionally fucking let go. You're not supposed to look 30 when you're 45. There's nothing wrong with you. There's a different kind of beauty that emerges, but it's not the maiden beauty. It's not.
And what I'm thinking of as you're speaking is the invisibility that can descend in the 40s, where there's this subtle sense of, okay, people just aren't noticing me or aren't looking. Like I was at in a shopping center and I went to order a juice from the juice bar and the guy, like he's probably in his like 21, 22, he really didn't see me as I was ordering this juice. I could feel that it's like he was looking through me because I'm a woman in my 40s and I just don't exist to him.
That experience, I've heard this many, many, many times, the sense of invisibility that happens for women, particularly as they enter like 50s and 60s. What do you feel like if you could rewind 10 years ago, how would he have seen you and interacted with you?
Well, the first thing that comes up for me is as a human.
Okay.
So, like back to the denial of humanity.
Hmm.
What I'm really with is just when our truth is coming out is when the world turns away from us.
Yeah. What a coincidence.
Like, come on, now I've really got something to say. So I guess there's double obstacle to getting this truth in the world because we have to get past ourselves and all that toxic internalized
Right,
toxic femininity. Then we have to get past the world that doesn't want to hear it.
right. But the good news, I think, is like we potentially have the inner transformation and initiation at that point if we choose to step through it and not cling to the maiden beauty, maiden past, to not give a fuck. It's like I don't give a fuck if you think I'm invisible. I'm gonna fucking like I'm not. I will get this truth out. You can see me as the crazy old bitch. I don't give a fuck. Right? That's what turns me on is like being
Yeah.
able to be like, oh, you think I'm invisible and like a crazy old bitch? Like, great. I don't give a fuck. That's hot to me. That's hot. I'm having a little bit of a different experience, which is that I'm really enjoying being more invisible. I'm really enjoying being less of a patriarchal sex object when I move into the world.
Mm.
I'm really enjoying that I'm not being noticed by men. I quite like it. And it's wild too because I remember back to being like 19 and just how many, like when I would walk out into the world, how many men would like really predatorily, like creepily, like try to like get in my.
Mm.
And I mean, it really was a problem for a
Mm.
long time. And it created, I think, a lot of like subtle trauma in my system where I just kind of had like a lot of guards up because walking out into the world just, I mean, I can remember walking in San Francisco and having met like like vulgar things at me, as I'm walking down the street, just like in normal clothes, like being a person.
Mm.
And I really like that less of that is happening now. I'm like, I am stoked to not be the patriarchal sex object anymore.
Like more of your energy can be with you, not having to defend or like figure this shit out. Yeah.
Not having to manage all that yuckiness.
Can we just go back to the oracle for a minute? Because
Yes.
I'm really wondering if she holds such a key for everything that we're talking about here, because I don't know much about the oracle, so I want to ask you. But from what you've said, it sounds like she is sitting in her temple. She is sitting in her seat in life within herself. And whether people come or not, she will tell truth.
Right.
Like, so this, I feel like she's holding a wisdom key for us here in the premenstruum and in the 40s.
Mm. Yeah, let me feel into that. I think what's coming to me is something about that radical trust. Because the oracle, the Delphic oracle, the Pythia, was considered to be the word of God. I mean, that's how serious what she said was taken. What she said was the truth. And, Socrates went to the Delphic oracle. The Trojan horse was built because of something the oracle said. So, but if you can imagine that level of trust, I mean, I'm sure you and many of your listeners probably do tarot cards, right? A tarot reading is really only powerful. It's not very powerful if you're just kind of like, and like, oh, I don't like that card. Let's just do another one. And like, what makes it such a powerful ceremony is to relate to it, experimentally as this is the truth. And then to, play with that.
Mm.
So that's sort of what's coming to me is we get these instincts as women, and perhaps those instincts come more online in the 40s because of the hormonal shifts and the kind of caretaking that starts to fall away.
Mm.
We get instincts, we see shit, we smell shit, we know shit.
And we've lived enough to see it.
We've lived enough to see it. Yep. And so maybe I think there's something about like, am I willing to just completely surrender to what I know that I know?
Mm. Mm.
No, like, oh, here's what the oracle says, but like, yeah, but like also this, and maybe it's me, and maybe like, what would it feel like? When you know something is true, when you get that little sparkle of truth, that deep instinctual knowing, to fully surrender to that. I know I'm seeing clearly.
Mm. I feel like there's a direct relationship there with the pink tender place that you were describing. 'Cause I feel like the more that we can allow that, the more that we can hear the truth.
Mm.
The more I can let all of the world fall away and just be with that skinless feeling, the more I know who I am, the more I can hear that truth.
I really am like at heart, I'm like a philosopher. I'm like a heretical heretic philosopher.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thing is like I see distortions in the sort of dominant paradigms of all these different things, and I'm kind of like dismantle it. So I guess I'm always in that dark goddess truth serum premenstrual state in a way.
Yeah.
Um, or it's a big part of like the medicine I have for the world. But
Watch out, world, with Maya Luna in her 40s now.
yeah,
Woo!
yeah. I mean, it's just kind of I don't know. I don't really try. It's just like that's what I find myself drawn to being kind of obsessed with and interested in. And so one of the things that I see a lot is in the kind of personal development, new age spirituality world, there's just a really big emphasis on like this kind of empowerment paradigm of like creating your reality and being in your power and being in your, really turning away from the soft, pink, tender, vulnerable core and possibly even relating to the soft, pink, tender, vulnerable, I don't know, core inside of us as a wound, as like something I need to work through, as like, oh, this is my trauma coming up, rather than a sacred place,
Mm,
that actually, yeah, in my experience, in my personal life, the more I have been willing to kneel before that place inside of myself, the more not only wisdom, but love and tenderness has come to me. But I think that goes against even a lot of the kind of women's empowerment narratives, you know?
it's one of the things I most appreciate about cycle awareness, because I feel like the empowerment piece is there in the first half of the cycle. We're built up, our ego structure is sort of built up, and then in the second half, after ovulation, we dissolve into the soup that you and I are in right now, where we're
I
just
know.
pushing.
Isn't it just so unbelievable that we do that every month? We build up our ego structure and our identity and we like get on the surfboard, like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, like I'm doing life, I got it, and then we just get knocked off. I mean, it's wild. It really truly is like just being a woman is like being in a psychedelic experience all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. God, I could talk to you for years, but
Me
we've reached the top of our time. But
too.
it would be amazing if in like a year or two's time we could come back and we could hear more about how this premenstrual truth serum is how it's working in you. And it's been such a delight to be with you, to feel how you exist and the way you move your body and where your truth is coming from. It's just delightful to encounter. Thank you. And thank you for everything that you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much. It was really, really, really fun to be here. Come back anytime.
So I've got one more question. If listeners are loving you and what you're sharing, how can they find out more about you and your work and connect with you?
I would honestly recommend to just go on Spotify or iTunes or Bandcamp and type in Maya Luna, and you will find my poetry albums and my embodiment practices album. And I think that's a really great place. I mean, I could say all kinds of other things, books, classes, website, but that I think that's always the place I like to send people first to like feel where I'm coming from. So look me up on Spotify, iTunes, Bandcamp, or wherever you stream music.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, love. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us all the way through to the end. If you know someone who has been channeling some of this premenstrual truth-telling serum and it's been uncomfortable and messy and challenging in their life, please forward this episode to them to share some affirmation and some support and some companionship on this wild journey to embody the powers of the premenstruum of the inner autumn. If you haven't already, please follow the podcast, subscribe, and it would be awesome if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps the podcast to reach more people. And that's it for this week. I'll be with you again next week. And until then, keep living life according to your own brilliant rhythm.